It's week 13. We've got every quarterback, every tight end ranked and tiered. So before Wednesday, let's break down these updated rankings for week 13 of the 2024 NFL season. Welcome to E&M Fantasy Football, presented by ErvinandM.com, where I combine industry-leading data, Vegas sportsbooks, and expert analysis to provide you with optimal weekly rankings for the utmost accuracy when setting your weekly lineups in your fantasy football league. I'm writing this on Thursday night for Friday's video. Expect more videos every week for the other unit groupings like wide receiver and running back. And click the playlist in the top right for all the updated rankings for week 13. We begin the rankings with quarterbacks. Sportsbooks have these quarterbacks projected to go over 260 yards or more. That is the highest amount this week. They are Jalen Hurts, 263 over-under, 258 yards per game. It's a 51-point scoring total, one of the highest of the week, versus Baltimore and their 31st worst secondary. Josh Allen, 270 over-under, 260 yards per game. They are 7-point favorites versus the Niners this week. Lamar Jackson, 269 over-under, but 304 yards per game. It's a 51-point total on the other side of the ball from Jalen versus the scary Philadelphia Eagles defense. Justin Herbert, 268 over-under, only 238 yards per game. But it's a high-scoring, close game with a 47-point total against the 26th worst Atlanta Falcons pass defense. Joey B, Joe Cool, Joey 260 over-under, 275 yards per game. Another high-scoring, close game set at 47 versus the just below league average Pittsburgh 17th worst pass defense. And CJ Stroud, 259 over-under. He just sneaks into the S tier with 240 yards per game as 4-point favorites against Jacksonville's worst in the league pass defense. These 6 guys are in the best position to go over 260 yards with their arms and their legs. They have close, high-scoring team totals and favorable matchups. They are your undisputed S tier for Week 13. A tier is for the rest of the elite quarterbacks projected for 250 to 260 total yards. Any of these guys can finish in the top 6. We'll kick it off. Matt Stafford, 254 over-under, 254 yards per game. It's a great total. He gets the Saints' bottom 3 pass defense. It's a dream matchup. Since his 2 top wideouts return, it's been 284 yards passing per game and 2.8 passing touchdowns per game. I mean, he has been outstanding. The total backs it up. Lock him in. We'll go back-to-back with Darnold and Murray at 8 and 9 facing off against each other this week. They both have great matchups for passing offenses. It's one of the closest games of the week. While Darnold is the safer option, it is neck and neck with Kyler, who carries slightly more upside given his rushing ability. He raises his ceiling but lowers his floor, making him just slightly more volatile than Darnold. Minnesota's total defense should prove more formidable than the Cardinals, which is why Vegas has the Vikings as slight favorites over Arizona this week. And at 10, Jaden Daniels. 252 over-under, 264 yards per game. They're 6-point favorites in this one over Tennessee and their best in the league secondary. This could easily be a game where Jaden just hands the ball off, but given his backfield is not 100%, we could see more hero ball from Daniels in this one. The Titans' defense is no joke, but Jaden's outlook is just positive enough to keep him out of the B tier, which has a larger gap than weeks prior. Which brings us to the B tier. These guys are projected for 230 to 240 yards. Notice the difference. This isn't just colors for anything and numbers for nothing, all right? They still have good matchups with high totals, with the exception of the last two, but hopefully you're slotting someone in S or A tier and not here. We'll kick it off with ErvinandM.com. ErvinandM.com is my company my best friend and I started in 2020. We literally make everything ourselves by hand. We have earrings, rings, necklaces, bracelets, tie clips, apparel, and more. Over a dozen curated gemstones and 100 handcrafted products. If you need a gift or something special for yourself, use the promo code in the description, find something you love, and buy it today. Now back to the video. If you like spending money and looking good, shop at my store, ErvinandM.com. But if you don't, subscribe. It's free. We'll kick it off with Baker Mayfield at 11. He's easily in the best position out of the others, 235 over-under, in spite of 254 yards per game. The Bucks have the best total and spread over the others, and to boot, Carolina's secondary is 24th, solidifying the 11th spot for Baker this week. He's a touchdown throwing monster, one of the best in the league, and though his projections are lower than usual given the improvements from the Panthers over the past few weeks and the fact that it's a divisional game, he'll still be just fine. Bo Nix at 12, 240 over-under, 237 yards per game. He's got the next best spread at 5 points over the Browns' league average pass defense this week. He should be able to get his 200-plus passing and rushing yards in this coast to victory. The slow pace of the Broncos, however, does set this matchup to one of the lowest totals of the week, but he's still in good shape as far as fantasy goes. Kirk Cousins at 13, 238 over-under, in spite of 255 yards per game. I mean, Cousins is set for a close, high-scoring game set at 47, but he finds himself behind the other two, not just because they're dogs in this one, but the Chargers' 9th best pass defense and top 12 total defense. They're going to make it quite hard for Atlanta. Bijan is honestly their best path to remain competitive, and the data predicts the Chargers keeping Cousins honest against the air raid balling out offense for 300 yards or more. Drake May at 14, 250 over-under, in spite of 218 yards per game. He has a fantastic matchup against the Colts' 27th worst pass defense, but they are dogs in this one with a low total, which makes sense given they are 31st in the league for scoring offense. Patriots are not good. May should be able to do enough for his fantasy points, but the Patriots in real life will remain in the gutter tier in spite of May's effort. Geno Smith at 15, 233 over-under, in spite of 276 yards per game. I mean, Geno gets the second best secondary this week, unfortunately, putting a lid on the Seahawks' second highest passing offense, to the tune of about 40 passing yards below expected. I mean, the total backs up this dirty matchup with one of the lowest totals of the week. Expect a lot of KW3 and a lower octane air raid offense this week. From here, it's your last chance of viability. Sportsbooks have this group for 220 to 230 total yards. There's only 4. Anthony Richardson, 222 over-under, 217 total yards per game. His number is as modest as his return to glory. The only thing putting him over the others is not his favorable 22nd Pats secondary matchup, but his rushing touchdown upside. He's arguably the most volatile of the group. He's got what it takes to finish in the tiers above over the others. GL. We'll go back to back with Mr.
Unlimited
and Derek Carr next at 17 and 18. Their over-unders are both set at about 220 yards, while Wilson has averaged more passing yards per game than Derek, both facing bottom 12 pass defenses. They both have high-scoring totals in close games, but the projections indicate run-heavy offenses for both and modest passing yards in spite of the favorable back seven matchups. Temper expectation. And at 19, Jameis Winston. He's outperformed the others by a mile. It's 228 over under in spite of 295 yards per game. I mean, if that doesn't indicate that Denver's 8th best pass defense and 3rd best total defense is going to keep his arm in check this week by 70 yards under expected, I mean, I don't know what else you need to indicate a significant discrepancy in matchups. Should raise a lot of red flags for fantasy managers. Couple that with the low total and the Browns nearly 6-point dogs. This is a recipe for disaster for Jameis in spite of his production over expected thus far. But from here, it's RIP. It's less than 220 yards. They're practically unstartable. It's the rest. A-Rod, Aaron Rodgers, Mayo Boy, Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter. That is your top quarterbacks to the Titans. The S tier begins with only 2 tight ends this week set for 50 yards or more. Trey McBride, 58 over under, 68 yards per game against Minnesota this week. And George Kittle, in spite of Brock Purdy's hurt shoulder, I mean, it's 50 over under still with 71 yards per game against Buffalo. I mean, these 2 tight ends are projected to be in the best position, all things considered, by Vegas sportsbooks to go over 50 receiving yards this week. That's the highest amount for week 13. They are your elite S-tier tight ends, undisputed. The A-tier is for the rest of the tight end ones, projected for about 40 to 50 receiving yards. And to be honest, any of these guys could finish top 3. There's 7 of them this week. Hopefully you've got one. Dallas Goedert at 3. 47 over under, 51 yards per game. The total is enormous, and Goddard easily has the best matchup, not only with the Ravens' 2nd worst pass defense, but specifically with Baltimore allowing 90% of tight ends to go over against them this season. This is arguably the best matchup out of any tight end on the list this week. Lock him in. And Taysom Hill at 4.
Hallelujah.
I mean, there's no lines for Taysom this week to support his position, so we'll just have to rely off his 60 yards per game average, the matchup, and touchdown rate to justify his position. And 60 yards per game, Rams below average secondary combined with 90% of tight ends allowing to go over against the Rams this season, and the high scoring close game. I mean, it puts Taysom in the perfect position to remain optimistic, as he should continue his production over expected against the Rams this week. Don't be scared. K. Dotton at 5. 45 over under, 44 yards per game. K. Dotton draws virtually the same odds in that the total's great, they're heavy favorites, Carolina has a bottom secondary, and have also allowed 90% of tight ends to go over against them.
Hallelujah.
His numbers are just below Goddard and Taysom, putting him right behind. You're not afraid. Lock him in. However, from here, the numbers remain very good. But the matchups become
Diarrhea.
for the others in the tier. And at 6, we'll go with Evan Ingram. 46 over under, 42 yards per game. I mean, Trevor could be returning, and it pretty much has no impact on Ingram's outlook. His lines and averages are respectable. However, the glaring issue for him this week is Houston's defense. Only 6 out of 10 tight ends were able to go over against them. And as expected, the Jags are dogs with a low total this week. It's not great for the Jags' 2nd best offensive weapon this week. David Njoku at 7. 48 over under, 43 yards per game. He remains Winston's easy button this season. He averages over 7 targets per game. His matchup against Denver's defense is less than ideal, to say the least. It's a low total. Browns are dogs. And only 50% of tight ends managed to go over against the Broncos this season. I mean, I'll be starting him in my home league, but prepare for a modest game in Denver. Will Dissly at 8. 40 over under, 36 yards per game. I mean, Dissly has slightly better odds with Atlanta, allowing 70% of tight ends to go over against them. But his incline in production with Herbert remains modest, albeit improved over the season. He should do his part this week for the projected points, but don't expect anything more. And Hunter Henry at 9. 42 over under, 45 yards per game. I mean, Henry and the Patriots offense have remained underwhelming in the past few weeks, and that trend should continue. Given the Colts have only allowed, once again, 50% of opposing tight ends to go over against them this season. His floor remains just safe enough, but his ceiling is lowered this week in this matchup, keeping him out of the A tier and just behind the others in this group. B tier is where it starts to get dicey. The tier is projected for 30 to 40 yards. Volatility begins. These guys are just above league average for yards per game. TJ Hawkinson at 10. Hawkinson has performed the best out of the group, but Vegas predicts a modest showing, just under 40 yards this week, thanks to the Cardinals only allowing 60% of opposing tight ends to go over against them. Total's okay, and he remains a staple in the Vikings offense. He could easily finish in the top of A tier, but expect Arizona to do everything that they can to limit Jefferson and Hawkinson in this game. Kyle Pitts at 11. 39 over under, 45 yards per game. I mean, it's basically the same story for Pitts as it is with Hawkinson. His performance over expected is lowered this week, just dropping him under 40 like TJ. Thanks to the Chargers' defense this week. 7 out of 10 were able to get home. However, they should prove to be a tough matchup for the Falcons, indicating a run-first offense over a Cousins air raid offense. Zach Ertz at 12. 33 over under, 39 yards per game. I mean, Ertz technically has the best matchup of the group in terms of opposing tight ends getting home versus the Titans, otherwise best in the league back 7. Sportsbooks indicate a modest showing for Ertz this week, lowering his ceiling from nearly 40 to just over 30 here in week 13. GL. And Mark Andrews at 13. 35 over under, 35 yards per game. Mark's improved over the past few weeks as Lamar relies on Old Faithful to get it done in the trenches for Baltimore. But as a tight end who lives and dies by a touchdown, this is practically the worst matchup possible for the veteran. Only 60% of tight ends are able to get home against the league's third best secondary, who also boast the number 1 total defense this season. Couple that with Philly's 60% allowance rate to tight ends, and Andrews once again lives and die by the red zone. We're at the cliff. From here, it's your last viable anything. It's 20 to 30 yards and pure
area.
And it's Pat Freiermuth at 14. The Muth has a path. Vegas doesn't have much faith, but the Bengals have allowed 80% of opposing tight ends to get it done this season. He remains volatile with this offense in spite of a close game with a nice total. He's just viable enough. GL. Juwan Johnson at 15. It's 24 over under, 25 yards per game. I mean, technically, he has the best matchup out of the group, with 90% of tight ends getting home against the Rams back 7 this season. His flat projections and averages, though, keep our hopes in check, as there's no indication other than that specific stat to merit any over-expected production for Juwan this week. Throw up a prayer. And we'll go back-to-back with Schultz, Likely, and Iki Gesicki at 16, 17, and 18. As they're all projected just 25 yards in their matchups against back sevens, only allowing 63% of tight ends to go over against them. I mean, Schultz is the most vanilla, Likely is the most volatile, and Gesicki has the lowest floor with the return of T. Higgins, pretty much completely pulling the rug out from under him. They're the last 3 viable anything options for Week 13. But from here, it's It's unstartable. It's RIP. It's less than 20 yards. It's the rest. Noah Fant, Colby Parkinson, Jatavian Sanders, Tyler Conklin. It doesn't matter. Anyone and everyone else. And I'll throw your quarterbacks and tight ends full screen back on screen now. Look it over. Leave your questions below. And sincerely, I hope this helps everyone watching. Thank you all for your time. All the rankings and news for Week 13 will be in the playlist in the top right of the screen. Make sure you subscribe and turn on post notifications so you can see all the videos each week before submitting your lineups. It's free, so it's a good value. But if you like looking good and spending money, spend it in my store and watch some more videos.